Hello there guys, it's Joey. So this is the second video, which is hopefully going to be one of the lighter style videos, and there's a purpose and a plan to it. So this video is looking at being light within spirituality, and by being light I'm actually referring to being childlike, to being silly, to being juvenile, to enjoying things which some people dismiss as being unimportant, or I don't know. It's kind of like the psychology of survivors, where psychologists insist that survivors go back to a state and they play, and it's about playing games, playing stuff you used to play as a kid, going back and tapping into that child psychology and tapping into the inner child, because it's a really important part of recovery for a lot of people. And the reason I think it matters in regards to spirituality in particular is that a lot of spirituality is considered to be presented as, and is, very serious stuff. It's the deeper, darker stuff. It's often exploring the shadows of ourselves, the more difficult concepts, things which are dealing with, you know, death and mourning and grief and aspects of ourselves we don't particularly like and we want to be better and evolve. And the thing that doesn't get touched on as much as perhaps as it should is the silly side of things, about being silly. And if you sometimes present ideas of being silly or incorporating silliness into one's spiritual practice, there is a scoff, there is an element of ridicule. And the reason that I kind of wanted to talk about this is because I'd had a request for a set, which will be at the end. So if you want to see it, you can hang around and see it at the end, but if not, we will discuss first. And that was for a Pokemon based set, and largely it was meant to be fun. It was meant to be drawing on something that the goddess of a lady who asked me for it wanted it just to be fun and to tap into that innocence that's within something. Now, Pokemon is kind of a phenomenon, and it kind of has this really nice interplay in different areas, because for a lot of us it's nostalgic, so it goes back to a childhood, but it's kind of transcended through different generations. So up till now, where we recently had the Pokemon Go phenomenon, which kind of drew kids and parents together and got everybody outside and got everybody interacting, and inevitably there were people who were annoyed by this, and there was people going too far and going into people's gardens and stuff. And oh, it's encouraging people to be badly behaved, as if people need an excuse to be badly behaved. But sadly, there of course are going to be naysayers for everything. But generally speaking, Pokemon Go is one of those modern phenomena which ties back to a sense of nostalgia, which got people out and about and interacting and perhaps talking to people they'd never otherwise have talked to, and sharing smiles and grins with people who knew what was going on, and taking us back to a sense of childlike wonder. Now, Pokemon is huge. So there are trading card games, the DS games. I think the DS games were first, although the trading cards might have been first. I'm not entirely sure. There are comics, there is many animated series, there are many animated films, there is a plethora of merchandise. This is my spirit animal right here. This is Jigglypuff. Our eyes even match today. That was not intentional, or was it? Was it deeply spiritual? No, but it was fun. And so for me, when I was asked to do this, I was like, yeah, we can do this, because I've played Pokemon since the beginning, which shows my age a little bit, but I've always loved it. I've always been drawn into it, and there's a whole kind of culture which has kind of emerged around it. And there is kind of a feeling attached to playing Pokemon, which takes us back to a childlike state. It's fun, it can be as involved as you want it to, it can be interactive with other people, it doesn't have to be interactive with other people. There are all kinds of different games within the Pokemon universe. There's kind of like the traditional part of the games, but then they have like evolved bits and pieces and dungeon runs and stuff and in all sorts of different things. And there have been like card games on the phone that you can do and all sorts. There's all sorts. And the movies, well, I've only seen, I think it was only the first one that I've seen with Mew and Mewtwo, and I cried at the Pokemon movie. I'm not ashamed to say it. Like the whole Pikachu bit at the end, no spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen this really old movie. I teared up, it was sad. That's pathetic, but hey, whatever. Plus there's kind of like a whole Japanese culture with the whole anime style around it, which I know some of people who follow me are into. I love the Japanese. I love Japanese food. I love Japanese anime. I love a lot about the history and not everything about the culture. So there's a lot about it that I really, really enjoy. And so that kind of feeds into what I think is probably a past life for me. So it's not saying directly that Pokemon is part of my past life, because it's part of this life, it's not part of a past life, but it ties into that feeling of cultural, I don't know what you call it, vibration almost. And because Pokemon obviously has a very innate Japanese feel to it, even though the creatures within are based on mythological creatures for the most part. In more recent ones they've kind of got a bit weird and they're kind of not anymore, but originally they were based on mythological creatures of some kind, or kind of like the meshing of mythological creatures. So if you wanted to, you can kind of go through the original Pokemon and look at like the names, and you can look at like what the creatures are and what they look like, and you can go find them in like different lore. It's quite an interesting little tidbit of thing to do. It's kind of interesting in a way. It's kind of like modern re-evolving of mythical creatures in a way. One that I really, really adore is Ninetales, Vulpix and Ninetales. And the reason is probably obvious, but they're based on the, I think I'm pronouncing this right because I never do, is Kitsune. Kitsune. Somebody will correct me, somebody always does. But it's the nine-tailed fox from Japan, and Japan's spirit fox, which is sometimes a trickster, sometimes helpful, and I love all that mythology surrounding the Japanese side of things. So there's this interesting thing with Pokemon, which we're kind of focusing on for the light-heartedness within this video, because this is what the set was requested for. So it's interesting to me that you can take kind of like this platform, this plethora of this modern phenomena, and you can see mythical threads. It's not a mythical necessarily. You see, the problem with talking about light and sillier stuff is there's some people who are like, oh my god, look at her butt. I like big butts and I cannot lie. You other brothers can't deny. When a girl walks in, it's an around thing in your face, you get sprung. Anyway, some people will be like, oh my god, are you saying you should worship Pokemon? Are you that retarded? And you kind of like, firstly, okay, that's not what I said, but sure. And it's nothing to do with worshipping Pokemon. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is there are cultural threads, there are psychological threads, there are spiritual threads that can be perceived through all art forms, and basically Pokemon is its own art form. And it has, firstly, the Pokemon have been artistically rendered, artistically designed based on spiritual mythological creatures, and then elements of that have been taken, and kids are screaming, which is thrilling given that I'm on camera and this always happens to me. Wonderful. It's been a day for it just because I've got a migraine. So there's all these threads of spirituality and lessons and things that can be learned from Pokemon and things, and it teaches kids some good values as well, of course, and it can kind of help us to reevaluate those lessons that we learned when we were kids through things such as Pokemon, like, oh, it was such a sweet age when we believed in things like this. And maybe we should go back to that innocence, because we've lost some of that innocence, and losing some of that innocence is not a good thing. And taking us back to our natural childlike state. going back to something which touched us in a way, or had an impact in our childhood and helped us to connect and socialise perhaps, or something to talk about. And even to this day, adults will talk to me about Pokemon. Like, I've had videos where I'm like, oh my god, I got Pokemon from Japan and things like that, and people come talk to me about video games and about Pokemon and things. And it's a nice way of connecting with people who have fun with this sort of thing and aren't afraid to run with it just because it's silly. And I think embracing that inner child in this way, particularly in spirituality, is becoming more and more and more necessary. And this is not to say we take part of our childhood, or we take part of our inner child and we kind of ignore the serious side, because that of course is being way too rigid in our thinking, like we can only be either or. It's embracing both elements. It's embracing a natural innocence. It's embracing a time when things were fun all the time, for the most part, hopefully for most of us. And for those of us who being a child was not fun, and this is me, and I know there are others out there, taking yourself to a place of childhood innocence that should have existed but did not. And maybe there are elements of things that you can still bring in, and Pokemon would be one of them, where you have some good memories, or you can take yourself to a place that should have existed for you, psychologically speaking. Then you can re-embrace a little bit of yourself, and it's to do with healing yourself. It's to do with healing things which weren't so pleasant as being a child, or healing things that are hurting now by remembering a simpler time, remembering when things were fun, lighter, easier. And yes, you can look at the mythology of these creatures, these critters, these Pokemon, and you can see how those cultures have kind of influenced the different designs, the art forms of Pokemon, which I think is an interesting endeavour in itself. It's interesting to see how mythology still shapes things that are so out of the box when we come to like talking spiritually. And we can see those threads weaving through different forms of life, even though Pokemon aren't necessarily spiritual, although there are philosophies within it which you can perhaps say are spiritual in nature. There are lessons to do with, you know, working together and friendship, and ecosystem is a big part. Ecology, ecosystem, and protecting animals and the environment is a huge part of Pokemon. It's a lesson. There are Pokemon that are looked after and loved and cared for by humans, and then there are Pokemon that are not treated well and that are kidnapped and that are tested on and tormented and things by other human beings. And there is an interesting animal dynamic in there that teaches us and teaches kids about treating creatures on the planet better, even if it's in an abstract way, such as Pokemon. So that's just a few thoughts I had, and I didn't and I can't go on for too long because of this migraine brain, but I did want to cover these points. So I'm going to show you the items now, they're all behind me, that this beautiful lady requested. So firstly, so it's just going to be showing and talking about the products now, so if you're not interested in this bit, you're not interested in this bit. But the first thing is salts. So we went with a water Pokemon design, yeah, because it was obvious. Like, if you're going to have salts for a bathing experience, you want water Pokemon. That just, you know, it's Pokemon 101. And I thought about doing it differently, but I was like, but it kind of stays true to the Pokemon feel to me, to have the salts being water and being submerged in water, because the Pokemon battles in water are submerged in water and things like that. So the salts were that. So the salts were fairly self-explanatory. Then we have the pillars. So the lady asked me for legendary pillars, and I was in a bit of a bind with which pillars to do, because I did the votives differently, and I'll show you the votives afterwards. I probably should have done the votives first, that would explain this. But I decided to do Mew, Aerodactyl and Cosmog, and I've got the things up here. So Aerodactyl is this pillar. It's a beautiful dark grey with the pinky purple sparkles. Aerodactyl is this Pokemon right here, and this Pokemon is a fossil Pokemon. One of the first fossil Pokemons, if not the first fossil Pokemon they found, has a Mega Evolve, and it's all to do with fossilization. And I liked having that included because the fossil Pokemon are a little bit different. And from a sort of magical perspective, you can touch something primal and ancient and fossilized within that. So you can use it in terms of how you would use fossils within Magic. Something old, something ancient, something which maybe is part of your life and a long time ago, but it still affects you, and it's kind of that sort of energy. Then we have Mew. Mew. So Mew is a baby pink with a beautiful, trying to tip over blue edge. Mew is the psychic Pokemon. Who's that Pokemon? Mew! I love Mew. Mew is like a little trickster, a little fun, a little prankster, and so it has that energy, that fun, that psychic vibes energy. Curiosity, playfulness, that kind of energy. So that's the Mew pillar. And then Cosmog is from the Hawaiian Pokemon and is a nebula Pokemon. So I've tried to capture some of the nebula within the top of the pillar. Oh, we're really not focusing today, are we? And then this is Cosmog. And he's unusual. He's a psychic type again, but because he was from the cosmos and this universe, it has that kind of nice spiritual energy to it as well. So then we have the votives. So the votives are earth, air, fire and electricity, and represent one of each of the starting Pokemon from the original. So we have Bulbasaur with the Vine Whips. We have Squirrel with the shell on the side. We have Charmander, with the little flame for his tail. And then of course we have Pikachu with the little cheeks. I had fun with this, you can probably tell. So then we have a Spell Oil. The Spell Oil is psychic type, and it's a deep pink with lots of shimmy, and is all to do with psychic awareness, protection, playfulness, that increasing one's divinational abilities, but doing it with a sense of fun, so not being overtly serious. And one last but not least is my favourite, because I like this, because I'm sad. So she asked me for a smudge, and I was at first like, how do I do a smudge for Pokemon? And the smudge itself is to do with the essence of Pokemon, so it's to do with like building friendships, building communication, building union, communication, things like that, you know, like bonds between us and others. But it's a Pokeball! I may have made a Pokeball for the top of this smudge. No shame and no regrets. So this is what the smudge looks like inside, and it's very unusual. It's a lovely scent, and it's very unusual. And it does have all that energy of like forming connections and bonds and friendship and familiars and things like that. So I hope you like the items here at the end. I hope you guys enjoyed this brief discussion of things that are a bit lighter and bringing Pokemon into it a bit. So that's it. Many blessings.